Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review and for joining me for a special Thanksgiving review. Just so works out that the book I'm most thankful is finally getting printed is a book I got on the night before Thanksgiving. So this makes for a perfect Thanksgiving review. Innocent by Shin'ichi Sakamoto is a book that I have lusted after to have in print for a long time. When Sean and I first started the channel, and we came off of Strange Death and realized that Sean was going to keep going as a publisher. One of my biggest hopes is that someday we could call our own shots, and that would lead to Sean being able to publish Shin'ichi Sakamoto's work, because it was surprisingly not coming out in English. His work, The Climber, is in my top 3 comics of all time. Luckily, earlier this year, people have started reprinting his work in English. Finally, we're getting some translations, but it's long overdue, and so I'm very grateful that's happening. Hashtag DRCL came out earlier this year from Viz, and this gigantic collection here, this like a 3-in-1, is a Dark Horse Omnibus collection of the first 3 volumes of Innocent. Innocent is a staggering work of comics, but I'll say, like, hashtag DRCL is a great comic. Innocent is even better than that, at least so far. The hashtag DRCL, I don't know where it's going, really. And The Climber is so superior even to these masterpieces. So hopefully Innocent and hashtag DRCL will sell well, get the attention that Shin'ichi deserves, and we'll eventually see a translation of The Climber as well, because that's really, I think, the one that everyone deserves to read. But this is still, a top comic in my mind. It's an absolute masterpiece of the medium. It's got some of the most mind-bogglingly detailed art I've ever seen. As someone who spent a few years of my life working on Strange Death of Alex Raymond, trying to get the teeniest, tiniest lines possible, and seeing what Sean did with the reproduction on that work, this stuff crosses my eyes probably even more than what we did in Strange Death, at least in terms of the amount of detail that's in here, the textural stuff that's going on, and then the thin lines and cross-hatching that Shin'ichi uses are absolutely beautiful. But a sense of place and texture and time, lighting tricks all throughout. I mean, this is just absolutely masterful artwork. It's also a really compelling, really interesting, intense story. The story follows the Sanson family, particularly Charles Sanson. Here you get the Sansons as they exist. At the beginning of the book, you have Charles Jean-Baptiste Sanson. You have his wife, Jean Gabrielle Sanson, and his mother, Anne Martha Sampson, as well as Madeline Claude Gabriel, Louis Charles Martin, Nicholas Charles Gabriel, and Charles Henri, who's the title character, I guess. He's the main character in the book. This is a very famous historical family of executioners. So Charles was the third head of the House of Sanson. So this is a thing that was passed down in their lineage to be the executioners of Paris. And later, all of the sons will go on, and the daughters will marry into executioner families as well. So Madeline will marry an executioner. Louis Charles would be an executioner in 2 different towns. Nicholas would later be the executioner of Blois, and Charles Henry Blois, I don't know how to say that, and Charles Henry would be the 4th generation Monsieur de Paris, the executioner of Paris. So he's inheriting this craft basically from his family, but he's someone who wants a world where there is no killing and no violence, and someone who takes nonviolence seriously. This is obviously set during the French Revolution. Charles Sanson is the person who beheaded the royalty when the tides turned against the royalty, but he was the royal executioner as well. This story obviously takes a lot of liberties with history It's just using the historical facts as a basis to tell a story. And when this goes on into a second series, Innocent Rogue or Innocent Rouge, I'm not sure which one it is. And his sister Marie becomes the main character. It really takes a turn for the weird, and I don't believe the historical account is really something that Shinichi's interested in here. But it makes for a really interesting background where he can dig into the politics of the times, where he can dig into some of the tortures that were going on at the time and show the real brutality. Like here, Charles doesn't want to be an executioner, and his family's not having it, so they're torturing him until he will accept it. And you'll see that what they're doing here is they're slamming these wedges down in between his legs, which are held in this box, and slowly like pulling the legs apart and causing the blood to compress in there. So they really go into all of that kind of thing in the book and show what society really was pre the French Revolution, what kind of awful things were going on. There's a lot of political intrigues. You meet a lot of very famous historical characters throughout. So it's just an endlessly compelling book. But you can see some of the artwork in here. I mean, just absolutely stunning. It's too bad this is in one of these omnibuses that gets a lot of gutter loss, because these 2-page spreads are so gorgeous. Hopefully, I mean, I'll tell you right now, Dark Horse, I will buy all of these in omnibus form, hoping that you print them in hardcover form like Berserk, so I could throw these away and buy those. That's the ultimate format for this book. This art needs to be seen at that larger size. It needs to be able to be seen fully splayed out, but it has to sell well enough for them to do that. So I'm willing to put down the money to buy all of them in softcover to hopefully get the hardcover that I've been dreaming of all along. Here you can just see again some of the amazing art. Shinichi's really using this as a chance also to deal with the very flowery Rococo type of style and the dress and the architecture and stuff. So you get these images like this. This is Jean de Chatois, who's a 14-year-old that Charles makes friends with and has like a little affair with. But yeah, I mean, just the beautiful hair, the beautiful costuming through everything, the fireworks. It's just absolutely spectacular art. I know in The Climber, Shinichi was still doing everything actually analog in ink. In Innocent, he moved over to working digitally. So there are some places where the digital, like digitizing of photography, is a little too evident for my taste, but normally it's completely integrated in, and there's all kinds of cool effects and manipulations on top. So it's really hardly ever an issue. Like some of these, I think, are probably photo manipulated. I don't think anyone sat here and stippled on these doily patterns, but it integrates so well into the artwork, the techniques they use. It doesn't really matter. It looks like all a whole cloth, and Shinichi uses these effects really well to communicate a vision that I'm sure if he had the time, you can tell he's insane enough that he would stipple. It's just they're on the manga schedule so that him and 2 assistants are pumping this stuff out. There's a Monbin episode where you can see how he works. You see just some of the beautiful rendering of faces and expression here. This is Charles and Jean here having a moment together, and it's typical that in these storylines you'll have someone that Charles meets and forms some kind of bond with, and then something will happen where he has to execute them. Not always, but there's some intense like emotional drama brought on by that. But the really fine cross-hatching all throughout, it almost looks like shaded, like with the pencil more than black and white ink, but it has that pop of the black and white ink on the page. It's really, really lovely. But John has to be executed because they find a Bible, and this is Charles' first execution here. So here's later where like the beautiful boy that he meets has been beaten and battered. Shinichi's really good at drawing the grotesque, awful things that these kind of abuses, torture devices, and executions have. It's a hard book to look at sometimes because of how good he is at drawing those intense brutalizations, but it's so well worth it. And you can see that there's like never anywhere in the book any panel where anyone's taking a shortcut. Something else that I really, really like about Shinichi's work, and it's in The Climber, it's in Innocent, it's in #DRCL, is that he's very willing to go into the surreal to represent character's interior states. So here Charles is having to go execute his friend that he had made, a lover basically, and he's thinking about everyone as these dolls that they would practice on. It's like him mentally checking out. So Shinichi Sakamoto does that frequently in his work, where he'll map a more absurd, surreal image over reality, or even just go fully interior with the character to show their mental state. And that just gives him all the more reason to like show off and make these spectacular images. Here you can see the aftermath of the first execution, where it didn't go well and he basically loses his mind, and just the gore and the blood splatter and all of that combined against the beautiful clothing and the beautiful character with the beautiful hair, all that French beauty and Rococo, showing how brutal everything was at that same time. I think he does a masterful job of combining those two elements, which were essential to that era. And then talk about taking no shortcuts. Here's a page where, as the crowd is judging him, he starts seeing all these people calling him murder, murder, murder. And then you get this page here with God knows how many panels. And I did my damnedest to try and find a repeat in here, like, oh, this is actually, like 10 faces and they just digitally scrambled them around. I don't know if there's just like 20, 30 faces and they scrambled them around, so it made it harder to find, or just being so small, but I couldn't find anything that repeats. There's some facial structures that repeat, but they'll have like different hairs and things, so really taking no shortcuts anywhere in this book. Even on something like this, as far as I can tell, there's not at least an evident repeat pattern that I can find in there. You get introduced to a lot of other interesting characters, historical figures that will continue to play roles in the series as it's fleshed out. This is stuff that I read online, scanlations of it, once I got obsessed with Shinichi's work. So I've read all of this before, but it's been a while, and seeing it in this format obviously is way better. But you get Madame du Barry here. She's saying you can see some of the interesting political statements that Shinichi's making in this book as well. He's saying very soon we shall see a world where we can shed all the shackles of status and social standing and live in freedom and equality. So there's like a liberal, progressive political message throughout this whole series. When you get to the Innocent Rogue or Innocent Rouge, it takes a more of like a feminist bent, with the sister taking over. That's kind of baked into it. So it's really like thorough book, so many reasons to be into it, so much to say. And then also, continuing with the beautiful art, like he could have just painted this all black here with the ink, but has these techniques to get like the look of sunlight coming across it. It's just stunning. I just go on and on. Here's another. I just had to pick out some images that I liked. There's so many double page spreads and single page images like this, or pages with panels that I could have picked out. I'm trying to pick out the ones that are my favorite and or can set me up to talk about story a little bit. So here's another really lovely one with this lovely sunlight thing coming through. And you see Charles' younger sister, Marie, here. She's really much more interested in the family business than he is, and she's kind of training herself, even though like it would be inappropriate to have a female executioner at the time. So you get Marie Sanson, and at the same time Shinichi starts also drawing like a parallel life path with Marie Antoinette. So here you see the birth of Marie Antoinette, and you have these two Maries that over a long course of time will eventually meet up. Way later in the series. So this is something that's like very planned and mapped out as well, that has a huge scope to it. I think some of that is from the book that this is based on. It says in here it's inspired by Masakuta Adachi's The Executioner Sanson. So it seems like there was some novelization or historical book that Shinichi was using as a model for the story here. I don't know how closely it sticks to that, but I think that's helping him get some of that long-term kind of structural stability in the story, where he knows the map that he's going to be exploring throughout the series and can set it up with things like this that play out over volumes and volumes. Just masterful. Then, this is one of those things where you just got to show the piece. You can't even see on camera exactly how amazing this is, but like I can put my thumbnail here and there's like three faces here that are fully rendered. Since this is being done digitally, he must be zooming in to 5,000% and drawing. It's absolutely bonkers. I mean, every branch of every tree. And again, there's some where there's like obviously some photo manipulation in here, but this looks all entirely hand drawn. The way they're manipulating the photos are, really done to look like ink, pen and ink in the end with the tones over top of it. So just insane amount of details in these pages. Here's another example of the more surreal moments. This is Charles wondering what the king looks like, and he's saying, I've only ever seen the king's face on a coin. So here he's kind of mapping that onto a king, and you get these weird digital distortion effects that make everything wobbly. Just endlessly inventive images. Here you're introduced to another character. This is Sobuis, I believe is how you'd say the name. I'm not sure, but the king's like torture, basically, the professional torture. Again, another look at just the stunning imagery, the beautiful character designs. You use things like this that make the characters stand out, that obviously are stylized and turned into the manga language. That's not something that I think anyone in France was wearing on their face at the time. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But they definitely become like manga characters, even through all of the realism. The Shinichi's ability to kind of ride that line between realism and the stylization is always stunning to me as well. And he can kind of choose different manga styles from time to time. We'll see that in a later volume. I'll definitely review all of these. Here is Nicholas Charles Gabriel Sanson. This is Charles's uncle, I believe, or cousin, and he's coming into town. Now they're headed towards a drawing and quartering of a guy who stabbed the king or attempted to assassinate the king. And the cousin is coming into town to try and claim the role of the executioner of Paris. So he's going to be helping Charles in this execution, knowing that Charles doesn't really want to do something so grotesque as drawing and quartering, so cruel as drawing and quartering. And this is basically like the whole third volume is the story of Charles meeting this character, helping his son out, that character stabbing the king. So there's a lot of emotional buildup. There's a lot of political intrigue going on in these chapters as these characters culminate to this execution. And you really have this intense build-up scene where you think the execution's going to happen by the end of the volume, and you really don't even get all the way there. You just get the beginning of it. So just lots of time, this decompression that you get into manga put into these really brutal things, and it just makes it so gut-wrenching, to have all this emotional build-up with the characters and then just lean into chapters upon chapters of brutality. Here they're describing some of what's going to be done in the execution, and it's just insane. We shall now tear the flesh off the arms, chest, thighs, and legs of the criminal with a set of white-hot tongs. Then pour upon him a mixture of boiling oil, molten lead, pitch, wax, and sulfur. Following that, we shall sear his right hand, that which used the knife to commit the heinous act, with sulfur. So they're going to just absolutely abuse this guy. Then they're going to draw and quarter him. Also, at the same time, Casanova has showed up. He's having relations with a woman. So again, historical figures all throughout coming to see what's going on. There's some more cool surreal moments in here, but I don't want to blow all of the images in the book. And then you get the final torture scene. Here's a really cool image. I got to show that one. That's so cool. But here they're pulling the skin off the guy. You're getting some weird images in the trees. And they really lead up just to the point where they're pouring the sulfur on his hand. Just absolutely, after they brutalize this guy, now they're burning him again. And in the next volume, they'll get to the drawing and quartering. So just, it's hard to read, but absolute must-read stuff. And yeah, I can't think of a more insanely detailed and loved over book in terms of drawing. And then something else that's cool about this that you get in a lot of manga, but I really like the way that they presented it here, and it's showing what a good writer Shinichi is as well, is there's some translation notes, and a lot of them are talking about wordplay that he's playing to pile up meaning to get extra meaning out of things. So I find that really interesting as well. Altogether, it's a phenomenally printed, Dark Horse. This is a volume of art that would test even Sean's skills in terms of getting the teeniest, tiniest details. And Dark Horse has done a stellar job. Obviously, Shinichi, working digitally, knows how to prepare his files for print in black and white, so they've got the resources to do this right. I'm sure this could be printed larger and still look just as good, even better, because you'd be able to see the details. But yeah, I could not recommend this more. This and #DRCL, anything by Shin'ichi Sakamoto is at the absolute top of my list. And there's this kind of greater mission in all of this as well. You get to enjoy 2 amazing manga series, but for me, there's a greater mission here in like spreading the gospel of Shin'ichi Sakamoto, because The Climber is all of this. It's seeing this artist come into this level of mastery, and the story is a story about someone striving to become the best. And so that story is just one of my favorite of all time. And at that point, Shinichi was also working entirely analog, but getting the same level of insane imagery out of it. So that's a performance in and of itself. So that's a book to look forward to as you enjoy the hell out of Innocent and #DRCL. So please go out and buy these works. You'll absolutely not regret it. And hopefully it will incentivize an even better one coming along, which is pretty hard to imagine given how stunning of a masterpiece this is. And also knowing that this is going to be between this and the Innocent Rouge, Rogue, whatever it's called, I would imagine there's going to be 10 to 14 of these. I'm not sure. It should be a pretty big amount of work. So no small feat to pull this off either. So thank you very much. This is my thank you, Dark Horse. Thank you, Shueisha, for selling the rights to these and finally letting these things be printed in English. You have made me a very happy person for Thanksgiving. I hope everyone that is watching this is either having a happy Thanksgiving or had one within the last day or two, and that you're enjoyed your family and enjoyed the food. So thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it. Go out and get yourself a copy of this masterpiece. The Eisner nominated The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is a gorgeously illustrated and designed book. Dave doing most of the illustration. Amazing compositions throughout. What Dave is doing is he's recording his obsession with the death of master cartoonist Alex Raymond behind the wheel of Stan Drake's car when they got into a car crash. The best description of the book that I've heard is that it's like understanding comics with pages like this mixed with something like From Hell when you get into the theories about what actually happened with the car crash. And then with Sean on production, it's just one of the most gorgeously printed books you could get a hold of.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.